and told him I wanted to change my dissertation topic and go with the controversy over unidentified flying objects. And no scholarly work had been written about that. And he thought that was a great idea. He thought that was a terrific idea, and I changed my dissertation topic, and he immediately left to get a job at another university.
So it was just like that? No problem?
With him, because he was leaving.
Right.
Then suddenly I did not have a person to work with anymore, and I had to get somebody else. And I knew that this was a very fringe subject, even in the 1960s, when it was, oddly, when it was more accepted than it is now. And I finally wound up going with another professor, a man named Paul Konkin. And Konkin was extremely dubious about this dissertation topic, but he finally agreed to it, and I became one of his students, and he was extremely a very good editor and very good to me, and I wound up writing this dissertation, which was later published with Indiana University Press as the UFO controversy in America. And ever since then, I got my PhD in 1973, and ever since then, I've been doing nothing but, well, mainly I've been doing UFO and abduction research. So I just got into it. I can't tell you why. It just happened. It was my fate. It was my destiny. It was my karma. It was my craziness. It was all those things put together.
And what would you say if you paint a general picture for us here, for those who might wonder what your research has yielded, so to speak? Is there any easy way to kind of capsulize it for us before we kind of go into detail into some of these cases and where things seem to be leading right now?
Well, I think we should probably talk about, if you want to talk about abductions, which I've concentrated on exclusively since the early 1980s.
Yes.
There are very few abduction researchers in the world. There are some, of course, but here in the United States, there's only a few that sort of know what they're doing. And the problem with researching abductions is well, it's a lot more difficult than researching UFOs. With UFOs, by the mid-1970s, we knew everything that could be known about the UFO phenomenon. In other words, we had thousands and thousands and thousands of sightings that were investigated. We knew what they looked like, how long they lasted in terms of being seen, how long they were in the vicinity. We knew what kind of movements they had. If the objects were sighted at night and they had lights on them, we knew what kind of lighting they had. There were all sorts of we knew everything about the credibility of witnesses. It was every conceivable kind of witness, from the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, on down to people who are not the president, and everybody in between, and professors, and a rabbi, a minister, and a priest, and on. We knew everything you could know about. Objects were seen on the grounds. We had tests about how heavy the object was. We knew about their effects on the environment. We knew about their effects on people. We knew about their effects on mechanical devices, on electrical devices, on and on and on and on by the 1970s, by the mid-70s. In 1969, the UFO researcher Alan Hynek called it, in 1971, he called it the embarrassment of riches. We had an overwhelming amount of evidence, films, radar, audio tapes, every conceivable kind of evidence you could have except a UFO. And so since that time, since the mid-1970s, all UFO investigations have served one purpose and one purpose only, and that is that they validate the fact, they verify the fact that a strange, unusual object, artificially constructed, under intelligent control, and anomalous, that is to say, not from any area that we could possibly think of here on Earth, flew within sight of credible witnesses and even might have made marks on the ground or whatever it is. So, we have every sighting since then has not added to our knowledge of the phenomenon. It has only verified and validated what we already know. The problem then is that you've come across a sort of limit of knowledge about UFOs because UFOs are simply the outside shells of objects. It's the inside that's the important thing, obviously.
Yes.
And for many years, many UFO researchers refused to look inside. They wouldn't. That was a line over which they would not step. They wouldn't step over that line. Looking at the outside shells of objects, okay, that's one thing. And some UFO researchers are extremely conservative, and even though the evidence is overwhelming that this is not a terrestrial phenomenon, they'll say, well, it's unidentified, and the unidentified means that we're still searching for the identity. Well, we may never find it, but so everybody sort of has a comfort zone that they live in.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, starting in the 1960s especially, people began to report what UFO researchers called occupants. And because you couldn't say aliens, that would be crazy. And eventually they became known as humanoids because they looked slightly human. So, but the aliens was a word you never uttered in the United States. And there were oddities taking place as well. We got a couple in 1957. We had an abduction event happen in Brazil that was reported to us that had a sort of sexual or reproductive content to it that was so embarrassing and so totally crazy, to use that word again, that it was not even published until 1966, until 9 years later. Then we had the Barney and Betty Hill case in 1961, which was also published in 1966. And the problem here was these cases were interesting. They were, but they didn't make a pattern. And the question is, with UFOs, everything's a matter of patterns. If you have one object doing one thing, it doesn't mean anything. If you have 1,000 objects doing one thing, it means something. Then you have a pattern.
Yeah.
And UFOs fit very neatly into patterns, and patterns were all identified early on. But abductions were a whole different situation because they came out of people's minds without that whole range of evidence that UFOs had accompanying them. Photographs and radar tracings and 8mm and 16mm and 32mm film and tapes and everything else. That did not exist with abductions. Not only that, but the abductions scared UFO researchers. It scared them because in the 1950s in the United States, there were a group of people known as contactees. These were characters who tried to make a buck, tried to make $1 off of the flying saucer phenomenon. And they claimed to have met beautiful, wonderful, benevolent space brothers who gave them rides in flying saucers and would take them here and there wherever they wanted to go, and sometimes would take them up to the moon, and sometimes to Venus, and sometimes to Uranus, and sometimes to Jupiter, or wherever they wanted to go. And one guy claimed that he had dinner with the king of the moon, and the air on the moon was just like the air that you and I breathe here and all that. Mm-hmm. And the legitimate UFO research organizations spent 10 years battling the contactees and trying to show that they did not represent UFO witnesses or the UFO phenomenon, that they were fake, they were charlatans, etc. When the abductees came along, most UFO researchers had three words to say. No, no, no.